Salma had learned early in life how to smile without meaning it. At 30, she carried herself with a quiet grace that masked years of small humiliations, polite dismissals, and unspoken comparison. She lived in Lahore, in a modest but sunlit apartment near the canal, where mornings smelled like dust and jasmine and evenings echoed with traffic horns and distant azan. By day, Salma worked as a senior interior design consultant at a private firm, a job she had built from nothing. After her father's death, supporting herself through university with freelance sketches and sleepless nights. By night, she returned to silence, no husband waiting, no child's laughter, just her thoughts and the soft hum of a ceiling fan. In her family's eyes, this quiet life was not independence. It was failure. Her younger sister Becky, on the other hand, was everything Salma was. Not allowed to be married early, adored loudly, celebrated publicly. Becky's life unfolded like a festival banner, while Salma's achievements remained folded neatly away, never worth displaying. So when the invitation for Becky's baby shower arrived, wrapped in pasta, colors and exclamation marks, Salma already knew what awaited her. The questions, the laughter, the sideways looks. Still, she went. Because she always did. The baby shower was held at their aunt's sprawling house, decorated in pink balloons and soft music, the kind that floated gently but pressed heavily on Salma's chest. Women gathered in circles, hands resting on swollen bellies or holding teacups, eyes sharp with curiosity. The moment Salma stepped inside, she felt it, that familiar pause, that brief scan from head to toe, as if everyone silently asked the same question: why is she still alone? Becky sat at the center, glowing, surrounded by gifts and attention, laughing loudly as Salma approached. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Becky said with a teasing smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she laughed and added, loud enough for the room to hear, "Still single, sweetheart?" The laughter came instantly, like rehearsed applause. Before Salma could respond, their mother leaned in, her voice sweet but sharp. "Becky's having her first baby," she announced proudly, as if Salma didn't already know, as if this was news meant to sting. "Time flies, doesn't it?" Salma smiled. She always smiled. She nodded politely, congratulated Becky, placed her gift on the pile, and took a seat near the window. No one asked about her work. No one mentioned the award she had won last month. No one cared. The air felt heavy, thick, with judgment disguised as celebration. Then, something shifted. The front gate opened, and a man walked in holding the hand of a small child, maybe 6 or 7 years old. The chatter slowed, heads turned. The man was tall, composed, dressed simply but confidently, his presence calm yet commanding. The child clutched his fingers tightly, eyes curious and cautious. They didn't look lost, but they didn't look like guests either. The man scanned the room once, then his eyes landed on Salma. His expression changed. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. He walked toward her without hesitation. "Salma," he said gently, his voice steady. "It's been a long time." The room went silent. Salma's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the teacup. She stood slowly, her heart pounding so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She knew that voice. She knew that face. Years had passed, but memory does not age the way people do. "Adam," she whispered. Becky frowned. Their mother stiffened. Whispers rippled through the room like a sudden breeze. Adam looked down at the child beside him and smiled softly. "This is Ayan," he said, "my son." A pause. A sharp, unbearable pause. And he continued, looking directly at Salma now, his voice firm. "He's been asking to finally meet the woman who changed my life." Gasps. Shock. Confusion. Salma's world tilted. The past she had buried, the choice she had made alone, the sacrifice, no one knew about it, all rushed back in a single, overwhelming wave. Her family stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as the unmarried daughter, not as the quiet sister, but as a woman standing at the center of a story they never bothered to learn. Adam turned to the room. "You all laugh because you think you know her," he said calmly, "but you don't know what she gave up, you don't know what she saved, and you certainly don't know who she really is." The child squeezed Salma's hand, and for the first time in years, Salma didn't smile to survive. She stood tall, tears burning in her eyes, ready to finally speak. The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. Salma could feel every pair of eyes burning into her, searching her face for answers she had never been allowed to give. Her mother's lips trembled, caught between disbelief and something dangerously close to guilt. Becky's smile had vanished completely now, replaced by a tight, defensive stare. Salma looked down at the child holding her hand, at Ayan's wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity, and something inside her cracked open, years of silence breaking at once. She gently freed her hand and straightened her shoulders, breathing in slowly, reminding herself that she was no longer the girl she once was, trembling under expectations she didn't choose. Adam spoke again, his voice calm but edged with a truth that refused to be softened. He explained how many years ago, when Salma was just 23, brilliant and ambitious, she had been offered a scholarship abroad, an opportunity that could have changed everything. But at the same time, Adam's life had been falling apart. His wife had left, abandoning their unborn child, and he had been drowning in responsibilities he didn't know how to carry alone. Salma had stepped in quietly, not as a savior, but as a steady presence, helping, supporting, sacrificing. When the time came, she chose family over dreams, responsibility over recognition. She walked away from her future so a child could have one. And when whispers began, when questions rose, she disappeared from Adam's life without explanation, believing that her absence would protect everyone involved, including the child she loved but could never claim. Salma finally spoke, her voice soft but unshakable. She told them how she had watched Becky's wedding from the back of the hall, clapping politely while carrying her own heartbreak in silence. How she endured every family gathering, every comment, every sideways glance, knowing that if she spoke, she would be judged more harshly than praised. She spoke of nights spent working until dawn, of building her career alone, of choosing dignity when no one offered her understanding. Her words didn't accuse, they didn't beg, they simply existed, honest and unadorned, and that made them impossible to ignore. Becky shifted uncomfortably, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. For the first time, she looked at Salma not as the older sister who fell behind, but as a woman whose life had been quietly braver than her own. Their mother took a step forward, her voice barely audible as she asked why Salma never told them. Salma met her eyes, sadness flickering across her face. "Because you never asked," she said gently. "You were too busy counting what I didn't have to notice what I gave up." Ayan tugged at Adam's sleeve, whispering something that made Adam smile sadly. He knelt down and explained to the room that the boy had grown up hearing stories about a woman who taught him how to draw, who helped him with his first homework, who held his hand during nightmares even when she wasn't physically there. A woman he knew only as the reason Baba never gave up. Adam looked at Salma then, his eyes filled with gratitude and regret. "I didn't come here to change the past," he said. "I came because the future deserves the truth." The silence that followed was not awkward this time. It was heavy, respectful, transformative. Conversation slowly resumed, but something fundamental had shifted. Salma felt lighter, as if a weight she didn't realize she was carrying had finally been set down. She didn't know what would happen next, whether relationships would heal, whether wounds would fully close, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of being seen. As the baby shower continued, Salma stepped outside into the evening air, the city lights glowing softly around her. Adam joined her, Ayan between them, and for a brief moment the world felt balanced. Not perfect, not simple, but honest. And Salma realized that her story was never about being single or successful or misunderstood. It was about choosing her own worth, even when no one else could see it. Night settled gently over the city, and the sounds of the baby shower faded behind Salma as she stood near the gate, watching car headlights pass like fleeting thoughts. For years, she had imagined moments like this, confrontations, explanations, dramatic outbursts, but now that the truth had been spoken, what she felt was not victory. It was release. Adam stood beside her without touching her, respectful of the distance time had created, while Ayan leaned against his leg, already comfortable in Salma's presence in a way that felt both familiar and heartbreaking. Salma knelt down and smiled at him, asking about his school, his favorite subjects, his dreams, and with every answer he gave, she saw pieces of herself reflected back: curiosity, quiet strength, a habit of observing before speaking. Inside the house, the family struggled with their discomfort. Salma's mother sat stiffly on the sofa, her mind replaying years of comments she could never take back. She remembered every time she had measured her daughters by timelines instead of character, every moment she had chosen public pride over private understanding. Becky watched from across the room, her emotion, tangled jealousy, shame, and an unfamiliar admiration rising uninvited. She had always believed attention equaled worth, and now she was realizing that the strongest stories were the ones never announced. When Salma returned inside to collect her bag, the room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't mocking. It was cautious, almost reverent. Her aunt tried to fill the air with small talk, but no one really listened. Becky finally stood up, her voice trembling as she called Salma's name. Salma turned slowly, meeting her sister halfway. Becky apologized, not dramatically, not perfectly, but honestly. She admitted that she had enjoyed being the successful one, the married one, without questioning who she was stepping over to stand there. Salma listened, tears stinging her eyes, and nodded. Forgiveness did not arrive instantly, but understanding began to take shape, and that was enough for now. Adam explained that he hadn't planned to come to the baby shower. He had returned to Lahore for a short work project, and Ayan had insisted on meeting Salma, sensing somehow that this was the moment. Adam had built a stable life since those difficult years, running a logistics company and raising his son with discipline and tenderness, always reminding him of the woman who had once stood between chaos and collapse. Salma absorbed this quietly, realizing that even absence can leave a presence behind. Later that night, Salma drove home alone, the city lights blurring through her windshield as memories layered themselves over the present. She thought about the scholarship letter she had never opened again, the passport that had expired unused, the life she had postponed indefinitely. But she also thought about the skills she had gained, the resilience she had forged, the independence she now owned fully. For the first time, regret did not scream. It whispered, and even that whisper was losing its power. Days passed, and the ripple effects of the baby shower continued. Family calls came in, some awkward, some sincere. Her mother visited her apartment for the first time in years, noticing the quiet beauty Salma had created for herself. They talked not as judge and disappointment, but as two women who had both made choices under pressure. It wasn't healing yet, but it was a beginning. One afternoon, Adam called and asked if Salma would like to have tea with him and Ayan at a small cafe near the canal. Salma hesitated, then agreed. The meeting was gentle, unforced. They spoke about work, about books, about life now, not what could have been. Ayan showed Salma his drawings, one of which included 3 figures standing under a white sky. Salma smiled, realizing that some bonds don't need labels to be real. As she walked home that evening, Salma felt something unfamiliar blooming quietly inside her, not romance, not nostalgia, but possibility. For years, her story had been written by others' expectations. Now, for the first time, the page was blank, and she held the pen. Weeks passed, and with them came a quiet rearranging of Salma's world. Nothing dramatic changed overnight, yet everything felt subtly different, as if the air itself had shifted to make room for her truth. At work, she found herself speaking more freely in meetings, no longer shrinking her ideas to fit into polite corners. Clients listened. Colleagues noticed. A promotion she had never asked for but fully deserved was placed on the table, and for once, she accepted it without guilt, without wondering who she was inconveniencing by stepping forward. In the evenings, she walked longer routes home, letting the city breathe around her, feeling present in her own life in a way she hadn't felt since her early 20s. Her family gatherings became quieter, more careful. The jokes stopped. The comparisons faded. Her mother began calling just to ask how her day had been, sometimes sitting in silence on the line, learning how to be present without correcting or judging. Becky, heavy with pregnancy now, visited Salma one afternoon, standing awkwardly in the doorway with a container of homemade food and an apology that arrived late but sincere. They talked about childhood, about how differently they had both learned to survive in the same house, and for the first time, they laughed together without competition, without measuring who was ahead. Adam remained a steady presence, never pushing, never pulling. Their meetings stayed simple: tea, walks, conversations about Ayan's schooling, about Salma's projects, about life as it was, not as it once almost became. Sometimes there was a pause between them, loaded with unspoken history, but it was no longer painful, it was respectful. Salma realized that love doesn't always demand return. Sometimes it simply waits to see what shape honesty will take. One evening, as Salma sat alone on her balcony watching the sunset bleed into the skyline, she thought about how easily people reduce women's lives to milestones: marriage, children, timing, ignoring the unseen labor of character. She thought about how close she had come to believing the narrative written for her. And she felt proud, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. She had chosen compassion when it cost her applause. She had chosen strength when it offered no witness. And now, finally, the world was catching up. The day Becky gave birth, Salma stood outside the hospital nursery, watching her mother cradle the newborn with tears in her eyes. The baby was small, fragile, unaware of the expectations already being projected onto her future. Salma leaned against the glass and made a quiet promise, not just to the child, but to herself, that this cycle would end here, that worth would no longer be measured by conformity, but by courage. Later, Adam arrived with Ayan, who pressed his face against the glass and smiled. Salma stood beside him, and in that moment she understood something clearly for the first time. Her story had never been delayed. It had been deliberate. Every step, every silence, every sacrifice had shaped a woman who could now stand fully in her truth, unafraid of questions, unshaken by laughter. As Salma walked out of the hospital that night, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, she felt no urgency to define what came next. Love might return. It might not. Marriage might happen. It might not. But her life was no longer waiting to begin. It already had, and somewhere behind her, a child laughed, a family learned, and a woman finally stepped into the center of her own story, complete, visible, and unashamed. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly, without asking permission, but Salma no longer felt like it was leaving her behind. The days after Becky's delivery settled into a gentle rhythm of hospital visits, late-night messages, and small family adjustments that felt unfamiliar yet strangely comforting. Salma found herself holding the baby one afternoon, her arm stiff at first, afraid of doing something wrong, until the child relaxed against her chest and let out a soft sigh. In that moment, something tender passed through her, not longing, not regret, but recognition. She understood that nurturing did not belong to one version of womanhood alone. It lived wherever care was given freely. Her mother watched her from across the room, seeing things she had missed for decades. The patience in Salma's movements, the steadiness in her voice. That night, as Salma helped clean the kitchen, her mother spoke hesitantly, admitting that she had been afraid that if Salma chose a different path, it would reflect her own failures as a parent. Salma listened without interruption, realizing that even judgment is sometimes born from fear. She didn't excuse the past, but she allowed the present to soften it. Adam's project in Lahore came to an end, and the reality of distance returned. On his last evening, they sat by the canal again, Ayan skipping stones while the sky darkened. Adam told Salma that he had once imagined a life where she stayed, where things unfolded differently, but that imagination no longer carried bitterness. "You gave us stability when we needed it most," he said quietly. "I don't want to take anything from you now, not time, not choice." Salma appreciated that more than any declaration. They parted not with promises, but with mutual respect, and that felt like a rare kind of closure. As weeks turned into months, Salma began mentoring younger designers. At work, recognizing pieces of her younger self in their uncertainty, she encouraged them to dream loudly, to ask for space, to resist timelines that weren't their own. Her voice carried weight now, not because it was louder, but because it was rooted. The same people who once overlooked her began seeking her guidance, and she offered it generously, without resentment. One evening, alone in her apartment, Salma unpacked an old box she had kept sealed for years. Inside was the scholarship letter, yellowed at the edges, still unopened. She read it slowly, not with sadness, but with gratitude for the woman she had been and compassion for the one she was becoming. She folded it carefully and placed it back, not as a reminder of what she lost, but of what she chose. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were still moments of loneliness, still questions from distant relatives, still evenings when silence felt heavy. But now, silence no longer meant emptiness. It meant peace. It meant ownership. On her balcony, under the same city sky she had stared at countless times before, Salma smiled, not out of politeness, not out of endurance, but because she finally understood something simple and profound. Her life did not need defending. And somewhere inside her, steady and unshaken, Salma knew that whatever chapters came next, love, solitude, family, or freedom, they would arrive on her terms years later. When people spoke about Salma, they no longer spoke in half sentences or with pity tucked between words. They spoke with respect. Her name carried weight in professional circles now, associated with projects that reshaped spaces and lives, designs that felt lived in rather than merely admired. She had moved into a larger apartment overlooking the canal, not because she needed more room, but because she wanted light, wide windows, open air, and the feeling of choice. Every corner reflected her taste, her patience, her journey. Nothing there was rushed. Nothing was borrowed. Family gatherings changed too. Becky's child grew into a curious, sharp-eyed little girl who followed Salma everywhere, asking questions that adults often avoided. Salma answered them honestly, never shrinking the truth to make it more comfortable. Her mother aged quietly, softened by time and awareness, often sitting beside Salma during events, unconsciously leaning toward the daughter she once misunderstood. There were no grand apologies anymore, no dramatic reconciliations, just consistency, which Salma had learned was the truest form of repair. Adam visited Lahore once every year, always calling ahead, always leaving space for Salma to choose. Sometimes they met, sometimes they didn't. When they did, it was easy. Ayan grew taller, more confident, still greeting Salma with the warmth of someone who knew he had been loved even before he understood the meaning of it. He never asked why she wasn't closer, never demanded explanations. Children, Salma realized, often accept truth better than adults do. One afternoon, while watching Ayan explain a school project with excited gestures, Salma felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. She had not missed life. She had lived it fully, bravely, and with intention. The world simply hadn't noticed at first. As time passed, Salma learned to enjoy her own company in ways that surprised her. She traveled not to escape, but to expand. She took photographs, filled notebooks, learned to cook dishes that took hours instead of minutes. She built friendships that didn't ask her to justify her choices. And on some evenings, she sat alone with tea and memories, no longer wishing they were different. When people asked her now, "Why did you wait so long?" she smiled, not the old survival smile, but a calm one, and said, "I didn't wait. I was becoming." And that answer was always enough. Because Salma's story was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about standing still long enough to hear her own voice, and strong enough to follow it when it finally spoke.